Hello, my name is Shannon Wilson and I'm a chief attorney in Sedgwick County, Kansas. I'm talking to you today about sufficiency in sex crimes prosecutions. Before I begin covering the subject matter, it's important to understand that this particular area of prosecution is going to require some specialized skills. So you need to decide which of your personnel possesses those skills to handle the unique issues attendant to sex crimes prosecutions. These are intangibles, the soft sciences, if you will. Perhaps in no other area of prosecution do you work more closely with the victim. Understanding the psychological impact of the trauma that they've suffered and how that will play out in a courtroom is going to be very, very important. And understanding and ability to assess these cases requires some level of experience. This is perhaps not a starter area for your prosecutors. This is perhaps an area where you want your more experienced prosecutors. These are challenging cases, but so critically important. So let's begin. One of the primary things you need to have an understanding of if you're going to do these kinds of cases is an understanding of the protocols involved in trauma-informed interviewing. You need to understand this so that you can understand why your victims are speaking in the way that they're speaking, remembering in the way that they're remembering. You need to be able to explain why they might relay a story to the initial officers at the scene differently or with different details than perhaps they would to the sexual assault nurse examiner, or then later to the detective in the controlled environment of an interview. You need to understand whether your law enforcement has been trained in trauma-informed interviewing so that you can explain the interview process to your jury in a way that they will understand and be receptive to the information. You need to have a familiarity with domestic violence and the issues attendant to that area. Most of these cases will involve people that are known to one another. By their very nature, they are intimate partner violence. So understanding the DV dynamic and how that might play into your sexual assault cases is critically important. Oftentimes there will be overlap, and so that is an area that you need to be comfortable with and that you need to be able to explain and communicate to your jury. Understanding DNA evidence. The understanding of the protocols involved in DNA testing and examination, and understanding when there are negative findings, how to explain that effectively to a jury. You may want to be able to call a DNA expert even when you don't have it to explain why you might not have it. You can't do that if you don't know where DNA is most likely found and why it may not be recovered or why it may not be relevant to your particular set of facts. You have to have an understanding of toxicology. In drug-facilitated sexual assaults, there are specialized circumstances. You need to understand and communicate to your jury how drugs or alcohol may impact the victim, how they may impact the perpetrator. You may have unique subsets to your state laws that are specifically geared towards substance abuse. You need to have a familiarity with the mental and physical conditions of vulnerable victims. You, again, may have a subset of your state laws that are directly connected to the condition, mental condition, or physical condition of your victim. If you have a special needs victim, perhaps in a facility that has been assaulted, you need to understand the protocols involved in their care and in their ability to communicate, and you need to be able to effectively relate that to your jury to explain and inform the set of facts you have in your unique case. With respect to forensic nursing, you have to know what their protocols are, what it takes to become a forensic nurse. Once you become a forensic nurse, what are the steps involved in an examination? Why might they change depending on what the circumstances of the assault are? As is often the case, there are negative findings in sexual assault cases. That doesn't mean all is lost with respect to forensic nurses. You can utilize those experienced practitioners to communicate with your jury and help educate them in understanding why that might be. You also have to have a proficiency in jury selection. This might be the most important part because you can do everything else well. If you don't pick the right jury, it won't matter. So you need to understand that your jurors are coming in with a loaded set of bias and predisposed ideas regarding sexual assault. Those could be informed by personal experience, whether they themselves or someone close to them has been the victim of a sexual assault, or if they've been accused of a sexual assault or someone close to them has been accused. You need to understand what their impressions are about things like the Me Too movement, idea that perhaps the pendulum swings in extreme ways depending on what is in social media at any given time and what the headlines are in a particular news cycle, and how that might be impacting your jurors in receiving the information related to your case. You need to be comfortable talking about very delicate subject matter with your jurors. Oftentimes during the voir dire, if it's prosecutor-led voir dire, you may have someone disclose for the first time being a victim of a sexual assault during your questioning. You need to be prepared to handle that. If you have judge-led voir dire or questionnaires, you need to know what types of questions you want that judge to ask that would be helpful to you to understand and get to the heart of whether this is the right juror for your case. You need to know what kind of questions you should put in a questionnaire that are most likely to elicit the responses that will help you make informed decisions when you're picking your jury. I've separated out sufficiency in sex crimes prosecution with children because there are unique issues when it comes to dealing with children. It is a subset, obviously, of sex crimes, but there are things that you need to be very clear on when you're handling those types of cases with children. First of all, you have to be comfortable with children, talking to children, and making them comfortable so that they can communicate to a jury. You can imagine how intimidating these situations are when they walk into a courtroom in front of a jury, in front of their perpetrator, and have to communicate the worst moment of their lives. That's a big ask for a prosecutor. It's an even bigger ask for your victims. You need to have a knowledge of forensic protocols. Oftentimes, the biggest attacks in cases involving children come from the interview. That allows the defense to avoid attacking the child directly, so they attack the forensic interview. If you don't understand the protocols and how those are applied, then you're not going to be able to effectively defend those protocols in court. You also need to have an understanding yourself in how to interview children and have some training in that area so that you're not tainting the child, leading the child, any of those things that might undercut the credibility of the child. You need to have an understanding, again, of DNA evidence. This is also critically important in cases involving children because oftentimes you do not have DNA evidence when it comes to cases involving children, and you want to be able to effectively use your DNA analyst to explain that to your jury. Understanding forensic nursing protocols and how they differ when it comes to children. They are not the same. If you don't know that, you can't communicate that to a jury, and you might expose your forensic practitioner, or your forensic nursing practitioner, to attack by the defense if you can't effectively explain those differences and why those differences are present. Familiarity with the mental and physical conditions of vulnerable victims. While that was also a part of sex cases overall, it's even more important in cases involving children. Age limitations regarding what they can communicate and why age limits their recall sometimes, or the type of recall that they have. When you have children with special needs, for example, autistic children, nonverbal autistic children, is all lost, or are there other ways that you can communicate that case and those set of facts to a jury and still hold that perpetrator accountable? With respect to jury selection in child sex cases, it can become very challenging. While there may be a natural sympathy with respect to cases involving child victims, there are also some pretty strongly held biases regarding what a child can and cannot communicate. They may not be rooted in fact. They may be rooted in misconceptions perpetrated by media, Hollywood, any number of sources. Your job as the prosecutor in those cases is to understand that, be aware of that, and be able to effectively combat that during the course of your jury selection. So you need to know and have thought about, what might my jury think of a teenage victim? Is that going to be different than what my jury is going to think of an elementary age child? What is my jurors' experience with child sex crimes? Guaranteed they'll have some level of experience, even if it's not personal. They know someone who was the victim of a child sexual assault, and so that informs their filter of information. You need to get at that and be able to work through that to understand if that's the right person to sit on your jury. You need to be comfortable with people. At the end of the day, these crimes are person crimes, and their very nature is intensely personal, and receiving this information on the part of a juror can be incredibly difficult, challenging, traumatic. Secondary trauma is a real thing in our profession. It certainly is a real thing when it comes to prosecuting sex crimes. So again, as I said in the beginning, be very cognizant of the type of personnel that you put on these cases, including whether you yourself should be handling these types of cases. The victims deserve the very best we can give them. Thank you.